you everyone for joining us for today's webinar, Electronic Data Interchange for Buyers and Sellers. My name is Nicole and I'm a project engineer at HTDC Innovate Hawaii. Innovate Hawaii is part of the Hawaii Technology Development Corporation, which is a state agency attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism, whose mission is to grow the tech economy and workforce in Hawaii. Innovate Hawaii is the state's NIST Manufacturing Extension Partnership Center, which supports small and medium-sized manufacturers to enhance their productivity, growth, and technical performance through programs and services across the islands. Some housekeeping items before we dive into the webinar. This session will be recorded and will be sent to everyone who registered, and we are in webinar mode, so your cameras and microphones should already be muted. And feel free to send in your questions during the session through the Q&A function. Today we have special guests, Brian Finks, Senior Channel Sales Manager at SPS Commerce, and Bill Gaustad, Manager, Sales Channels at SPS Commerce, who will give a background on the different approaches to doing EDI and the challenges and benefits to be aware of. They will also walk through the SPS solution offering at a high level, followed by a Q&A session moderate by Trung Lam, Automation Consultant at Moosebear Innovations, Inc. So Brian and Bill, please take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Nicole. Really appreciate the intro there. We're excited to be here as well. And I'm going to see if I can pull my screen up here, and maybe you guys can let me know if it pulls up correctly. So just to get started. All right, does everyone see the correct view of the full screen, not the presenter mode?
Yep, looks good.
Perfect. All right, well, again, Nicole and Trung, thanks for the invite here. Bill and I been talking with the team here for a while now on what content makes the most sense to share here, and thought we'd give a really high level overview of, hey, here's EDI, here's where SPS fits into the picture. There's different ways of doing it. Here's the kind of businesses that might want to take advantage of something like this. And we'll probably be 20, 30 minutes or so of walking through the content here. And then, like you said, open it up to those questions. So just to dive into things here, I can do a quick introduction and then I'll turn it over to Bill for the same. But Brian Finks, I've been at SPS for about 8 years now, primarily working directly with our customers on, basically the vendors or the supplier side. So companies that leverage EDI to work with the big box retail stores that maybe they want to sell into. Recently moved into a partner space here, working with Bill. I'm out of our headquarters here with SPS in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And with that, I think I'll pass it over to Bill to do an introduction as well.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And again, I'll echo Brian's sentiment around. We certainly appreciate the time and grateful for getting everyone together here today. Some quick background on myself. So Bill Gaustad, I'm typically based out of Minneapolis with Brian, but in Las Vegas today. Some background, I've been in this space for 10 plus years working with organizations, whether that be a merchant, supplier, retailer, distributor, or even a partner for about 10 years. Where I kind of grew up was specifically in the system integration ERP space and relating that to EDI requirements, but working closely with Brian, certainly have expanded that over the years. So again, I'll turn it back to Brian, but certainly appreciate the time here today with everyone joining us.
Great, thank you, Bill. Yeah, just to jump into things here, a little bit of background on SPS Commerce. Like I mentioned, we're headquartered here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We do have 7 other global offices. Primarily our sort of presence is North America, but that's expanding a lot in Europe as well as the APAC region. We have a couple of large offices both in Sydney and Melbourne, so can certainly cover a global need. And I'm thinking, some people on the call here probably have a little more of a global reach, just knowing sort of the Hawaiian market and where you might interact in that APAC region. But yeah, we're a fast growing company and really excited to kind of walk through things here. So, I will get into a little more EDI specifics, but just to give you an idea of sort of SPS Commerce and where we fit. So our platform or our offering is really being the world's retail network. So we have over 90,000 customers globally. Those can be suppliers, 3PLs, any kind of company that might want to interact with someone else within a supply chain. Have over 3,000 different retail trading partners pre-built to our network. So those again could be retailers or grocers, different companies that want to work with their trading partners in some capacity with EDI. We have over 400 different system partner relationships. So partnering with companies like SAP or NetSuite or Sage or QuickBooks, different systems or ERP systems that your businesses might be running on. A lot of expanded reach there. And on top of that, we actually have over 1,000 different 3PLs we've also worked with. So 3PLs being third-party logistics companies that maybe help with warehousing or shipping, logistics, cold storage, really a number of different ways we can work with them. So to jump in here and take a little bit of a closer view on EDI, I'm guessing, or I was told, there's probably a pretty wide range of what experience different people on the call might have. So we thought we'd start here with EDI. It stands for Electronic Data Interchange, and really it's a system or a process or system and process that's in place that allows businesses to communicate with each other electronically, eliminating really the potential for errors from hand keying information or time spent doing things via email or over phone or fax. Common areas this is used, like we had said, is retail, grocery, distributors, manufacturers, a lot of different areas. So to look at kind of what a traditional order flow might look like would be, you think about a retailer or a grocer on the left-hand side here. They might send a purchase order, which in sort of the EDI world would be called an 850. All EDI transactions have a number corresponding to them. So you might see that thrown out every once in a while on here. But an EDI purchase order is an 850 sent out to one of their vendors or suppliers they want to order product from. That supplier would then send back a purchase order acknowledgement to the retailer telling them, hey, I'm able to ship the product, when in full or partial, whatever it might be. They would also then send over an advanced ship notice and maybe a packing slip back to that retailer, letting them know, here's when this is shipped, here is the contents. So when that order actually shows up, or the shipment shows up at the retailer's distribution center or store location, they can scan it with their own system, and it basically populates it saying, hey, here's what this pallet contains, here's the order it ties back to, here's who it came from, here's where it needs to go. So really important information to sort of make the process run a lot more smoothly overall. And lastly, sort of the most important part for the vendors is obviously getting their invoice sent out as well. Sending an invoice via EDI is going to allow that supplier to get paid faster frequently as well, because they're getting it in the system rather than having sort of a human manual process sort of intervening with the mix there. So with that being said, that is a pretty standardized process. And the whole idea with EDI is to make it a standardized process for everyone who wants to leverage it. The hard thing is really all the different buying organizations out there have sort of their own unique flavor for what EDI might look like. So they have different requirements in terms of the transaction types they're using. They have different ideas of, maybe a Target purchase order might look a little bit different than a Costco purchase order, for example, and they may have different expectations from their suppliers. So a lot of different things to sort of think about there. And I think generally the best way to think about it is, there's obviously a technology component here to doing EDI and getting the actual systems in place to allow you to do this. But the people and the processes behind that and the way they're doing it are really just as important as that technology to make sure it's done successfully and everybody in the entire process runs smoothly. So when we think about what kinds of businesses use EDI, it's really a fit across a huge range. The most basic sense, you can think of anyone selling goods into a large, big box retailer, whether it's a brick and mortar store or the e-commerce side of their business, any company wanting to maybe get further exposure on online marketplaces. You think about platforms like BigCommerce or Magento or Shopify becoming really popular as well. These are all areas where EDI can actually help make that communication between systems easier and more efficient. Companies, like I mentioned, that leverage a 3PL warehouse, so a third party for warehousing or shipping, maybe they, communicate back and forth with that manufacturer via email or phone or something like that. And it's just an inefficient process. So for example, if you can get an order coming in from a retailer to that supplier, have it sent to the 3PL via EDI all automatically, you eliminate a number of different touch points there and make it a lot more efficient overall. That really becomes more important then as you look at trading partners that have a high volume of orders and transactions going back and forth. If it's a really low volume of orders, it's not going to have as much of an impact as a business that's doing a high volume of transactions. Or in the case of a buyer or a retailer wanting to adopt EDI, if they have a large community of suppliers they work with and they're placing orders out to those different suppliers manually, putting EDI in place can be a huge benefit for them as well to basically automate that prior slide we had just walked through. Again, it all comes down to looking at time spent, manual processes. If there's issues just from purely having, the human aspect involved and, potential for errors with data entry or potentially chargebacks from your different customers you work with from those errors. And a lot of companies that come to us say, hey, I've been adding headcount trying to solve for this problem for a long time and it's not fixing itself, or my business is scaling and I want to, trim down that headcount so I don't have to keep throwing people at this and I can reallocate those resources to more strategic projects. This is a great way to go about doing that. So again, thinking about the breadth of the customers SPS works with, I like to think of this slide as sort of being the life cycle or sort of EDI journey for someone. So we work with companies all the way from startups that just landed their first big box store and they're excited to sell their product into that location and then find out, geez, I need to do EDI. How am I going to do that? They can partner with SPS. We handle all the technical setup for them, and they just really need to have a business level person able to run it on their end and not worry about it. As that grows, we see companies that maybe have multiple different ways they work with trading partners and they want to consolidate it, make it easier, a standardized process. Again, wanting to improve manual processes. So if it's really high volume of transactions, adopting EDI to streamline that. And then lastly, we run into a lot of companies looking at EDI or an EDI change if they're going through some kind of a system replacement. So maybe they're running on a legacy ERP system, or they're running the business off of Excel or something like that, and they're going to implement some kind of a new accounting or back-end system. Perfect time to have that conversation with your different trading partners and say, hey, would adopting EDI be a good fit here? So outside of EDI, I'm guessing a number of different people on the call here probably have varying levels of experience or things they've seen, especially tied to COVID and how that's changed this. But generally what we're finding is everybody within supply chain wants to have more information up to date and accurate now than ever before. And when you think about EDI, we would sort of place it traditionally in the center here. So that exchange of that order data, it's orders, invoices, ship notices, things like that. But what we're seeing now is a lot of people also are asking for, hey, from an item data standpoint or product information standpoint, they have 3 or 4 different Excel spreadsheets within the organization. Sales has one, finance has one, and they never seem to all align for that product data. So they want a central repository or an easy way to share that with their different buying organizations to make sure that the buyers actually have accurate information of the products they're going to be ordering. So that's an area we're helping businesses. On the buyer side, or the right-hand side there with sales data, we're actually doing the same thing with our analytics offering, again, sort of outside of EDI, but point of sale analytics. So helping businesses drive more sales by having up-to-date inventory information and basically sales performance so that they can then further collaborate with their buyers. Now, lastly here, something that I think is a big component of sort of EDI and getting this in place that a lot of companies don't realize is it's more than just a one-time sort of IT project, right? So when you think about a buying organization or a retailer wanting to adopt EDI, they need to then reach out to their supplier community and say, hey, we're implementing EDI as a new way to order with our suppliers. Here's what we're looking to do. A lot of retailers partner with SPS Commerce to handle that process for them. We actually have a dedicated team here for supplier onboarding, where they have, proven best practices for, billion-dollar organizations. We've done this for thousands and thousands of suppliers, where we say, hey, your buyer is wanting to implement EDI. Here are the options for meeting this requirement. Let's have a conversation around the best way for your business to do this. So something we can definitely help with on that side as well for the retail organizations. Bill, I know I'm going kind of fast here. I don't know if there's anything you'd care to add so far, or I can just keep running through it as well.
Yeah, I would say keep going. I mean, I was going to add on a couple different things, but I think some of that will be addressed in the Q&A. So go ahead. You're on a good pace.
Okay, perfect. I will keep moving along here. So again, we think about COVID, we think about businesses wanting to get further into Amazon or more sales channels. It's starting to cause a little bit of I don't know, the friction or problem for suppliers we work with, where they're saying, hey, I have 10 different ways or 10 different sales channels I'm engaging with my consumers. I want one easy way to manage all that. And you can think about SPS basically being that single hub where you can have all these different order channels or sales channels flow into SPS and plug into your system. So you don't have to worry about, if someone is out of the office and they're the only one who knows how to do the Shopify orders or the Magento orders, or, use Walmart Marketplace. Having it all funneled through SPS really makes it a lot easier to run a more streamlined and trimmed down team internally as well. So to take a little bit of a closer look at the sort of real world business impacts, I thought I'd share this slide, which I think it really does a good job of opening up the idea of thinking, hey, whether I'm a supplier or whether I'm a retailer, I kind of live within my own ecosystem. And I don't always think about, on a day-to-day, how my processes impact the other side of this or the other ecosystem I'm working with. So, to start out here, if I can get the slide to, there we go. So to start out, product data, we had hit on that earlier on. If your retailer isn't able to see accurate, up-to-date product information, how are they gonna, be able to order the correct products and make it show up on your end in a good way? I often hear from suppliers saying, geez, I wish I could get my buyer to, send correct purchase orders with correct pricing and correct item numbers and UPCs. So that is the first sort of point here where things can break down, and implementing EDI can really help with that. So leveraging our assortment tool helps with that portion of it. If you think about a retailer placing an order out to a supplier, that's kind of that next point. They can send an order out, but if they're doing it via email or phone or fax, they really have no clear way of understanding and confirming if that supplier even, received that order. Beyond that, the next step would be supplier fulfilling that order or sending it out to one of their warehouses. Another point of potential, human error or problem to pop up there as well. As that warehouse then ships the product out to the retailer, it shows up at the retailer's distribution center, and they need to know, what order is this? Where does it need to go? Is this a .com order, or is this going to a store? Where is it going? And throughout the process, there's basically a number of different points where this can cause a problem. And at the end of the day, the person we're trying to all make sure they're happy is that end consumer. And if they don't get the right product in the right place at the right time, that consumer is going to be the one who's not happy with both that retailer as well as the supplier of that product, the manufacturer. So EDI is a great fix to solve a number of these problems where the sort of the two ecosystems meet together. And to take it kind of a step further here, SPS Commerce, again, we do vendor onboarding and actually act as the EDI department for a number of large retailers as well. And what we've found is sort of most solutions out there really only solve part of the problem for what we just walked through. Most companies we talk to on the retail side typically have, a number of different initiatives going on internally, trying to solve for those problems. They might be looking at simply buying new technology, maybe a WMS or a warehouse management system to help get around that. They might be sitting on, excessive inventory, which is costly for everybody involved, just to make sure they're going to be able to, fulfill the demand when the customer shows up. Implementing internal process changes. Again, that's sort of one that you think about the retailer doing that. Supplier might not have any idea that's going on, but it's something that a lot of the retailers we talk with are trying to work through. And lastly, adding staff or adding additional headcount. That's probably one of the biggest ones is, you think about it can work to a certain degree, but implementing something that's going to solve for, if you have limited resources available. I know I've heard that's a hard thing right now with just having enough staff to be able to, meet the needs of customers coming into stores. So an area that it's really hard and just trying to solve for all of it. So something we typically hear from our retailers is 91% of them, they're really not getting the essential information they need from their supplier communities to basically meet the need of that customer. So again, this is a little bit of a recap from what we just walked through, but if you think about the problems, they do span across the entire organization. Reactive ordering instead of proactively being able to sort of better manage the process and the inventory, higher cost of holding on to that inventory, invoicing errors makes nobody happy. And then end of the day, lost sales from having a poor customer experience for that end customer. So again, it is on both sides, both the retailer and the supplier. So I thought this would be a sort of a real world actual example to share. This picture is actually from the SPS team. I think they're on site with one of the larger retailers in one of their receiving departments of a distribution center. And this sort of side area here represents 9 pallets of orders that showed up at the distribution center without the correct documentation, as in like no EDI. If you think about one of the EDI transactions, it's the advanced ship notice, the ASN, or an 856. That is a document that a supplier sends to a retailer when they ship the product, so that when it shows up at the distribution center, the people working in receiving can actually scan it, know exactly what it is, where it needs to go. These orders showed up without that ASN transaction, and they basically get pushed aside while everything else flows through the distribution center and out to the shelves at the store faster. Without having EDI in place, the people that ship this product or those manufacturers are basically at a disadvantage because their product is sitting here untouched until things slow down and that retailer or the workers there can actually go back and process those pallets and figure out where they need to go and what they are. So in this sense, EDI can definitely be a competitive advantage to stay ahead and not sort of end up in that area that's just not touched. Bill, again, I feel I'm kind of going through here. Anything you add there, or we'll save that at the end if you want to chime in at all?
No, I think, because a lot of this is extremely pertinent. Brian, better than anybody working with, suppliers and buyers and sellers over the past 8 years. I think anything that I would take away, and you're going to actually touch on it here in just a second, so maybe I don't need to add on to it, but it's a lot of this.
By all means.
Yeah, a lot of this is not just the technology aspect of it. There's a resource aspect of it as well, which again, whether that you're looking at connecting with your customers, being large grocers or retailers, or hey, I'm looking at launching this to my supplier community. There's technology is certainly a component, but there is another large component of that is the resource allocation and enablement component of it as well. So again, like Brian, you touched on it in many different ways, but if there's one thing I would take away from all of that, is again, we're not just looking at the technology. It's, hey, once this is deployed, how is this managed? And I think that's a great segue, Brian, to what you're going to be going into.
Yeah, no, thank you. Appreciate it. And again, EDI, there's a lot of different ways to do it, right? some companies that we talk to, they view EDI as a core competency of their business. They think, hey, I have a legacy system in place. I have an IT staff internally that runs it for me, and it's a competitive advantage for my business. By all means, great. They can keep doing that. If that doesn't sound like maybe your business and you'd rather partner with some kind of a company to help with that, that's where SPS would come into play. And sort of within the options for leveraging a partner, there's basically two different approaches I like to bucket them into. There's a full service approach and then a managed service approach. So SPS Commerce would fall on that full service approach. If a EDI user or someone that does EDI today says, hey, I want to own the software, I want to own the maintenance and that kind of thing, but I want a resource I can reach out to when I need help with support or some kind of a question or something like that, that's going to fall into that managed service category. The supplier or the company that's running EDI, they basically own the maintenance and kind of the day-to-day upkeep and everything, but they still have resources they can go to for sort of a reactive assistance as needed and a little more reactive reporting. If that doesn't sound ideal, the other side is, again, that full service approach, where that's where SPS falls into play. We're really the only full service option out there where we are being proactive. We have those existing relationships with the retailers and the buying organizations. And what we end up doing then is by being that expert that is operating as your EDI department, we give you back more time to focus on running your business and not needing to worry about EDI. So you basically get all the benefits of doing EDI without having sort of the burden or the sort of the pain of needing to figure out how to do it and keep it running ongoing. So to go into a little more detail on that and just think about everything that does go into doing EDI, we really find that there's basically 7 core sort of components that need to be accounted for. So as Bill mentioned, obviously the technology, you got to have some kind of a system to actually do this. You need to have the trading partner expertise. So actually understanding, hey, what order management models does this retailer support? What are the mapping or the document requirements that are going to be expected of me to work with them? What are the turnaround times for order acknowledgements? Things like that. They vary for every different retailer. If we're talking about taking EDI and plugging it into maybe an ERP or a financial accounting system, something like that, internally at the supplier or the vendor side, you need to have that design and configuration accounted for as well. Something I didn't touch on earlier is the different trading partners, the different retailers, they actually have different communication methods they actually sort of leverage as well. And that's typically dictated by the trading partner. So you might hear AS2 or VAN as really popular, probably most common used, SFTPs, APIs are becoming more and more popular as well. So these are all different ways that can basically the businesses can communicate doing EDI via those different methods. Lastly, something that a lot of companies forget about is, they think, hey, great, I implemented EDI, but what's next? They actually have to go through a testing and launch phase as well. That sort of managed service approach, that responsibility then falls on the supplier or the vendor or manufacturer to do that themselves. And same goes for the reporting and sort of ongoing maintenance and everything. So with SPS Commerce, what we typically hear from companies that are wanting to talk to us, they say, hey, I've been doing EDI for a while and I'm probably getting less than half of what's actually needed. And it's, they're getting the technology, they're getting the initial setup or the configuration with their system, and then some sort of ongoing support. It might be some kind of you pay to call in and get, a certain amount of time, whatever it might be. But overall, there's shortcomings there. So I won't spend too much time going into this, but with SPS, again, we're there throughout the entire process. So from the initial setup, SPS Commerce is actually picking up the phone and calling the retailer on your behalf. We're assisting with the testing. We actually don't have to do testing with over 30% of the retailers out there because we've worked with them so many times. And then we also help with the go live, ensuring everything is flowing smoothly and the ongoing support. So really there to help you the entire way. So by now, it again should be really clear. EDI, it's more than just an IT project, but it's definitely something that can benefit long term. Companies that partner with us are able to offload a lot of that burden. And I'll go into a little more detail on the way that our solution is sort of architected, and then walk through two options for how companies leverage SPS's services as well. So I like to think of this slide as basically this is the entire sort of retail ecosystem here. You have everything on the left-hand side where you have different trading partners or different retailers, maybe different logistics providers or co-packers or different companies you might work with and want to interact with via EDI. In a traditional world, you would be accounting for everything, in terms of their requirements. Again, if it's AS2 or VAN or FTP, whatever it might be, whatever different types of document requirements they have, and wanting to make sure that as a business, you're meeting those requirements so you're a good partner and a good relationship with them. When you're leveraging SPS Commerce, what we've done is we built out a cloud-based network to all of those retailers. Again, 3,500 different buying organizations pre-wired into our SPS fulfillment cloud-based platform. We standardize all of that. So, if you think about Target, for example, instead of having one connection for every different supplier or vendor selling into Target, in a traditional EDI sense, that's what it would be. With SPS, we built one multi-tenant connection to Walmart or Target or whoever it might be that all of our customers share. So we have one connection to Target for 2,000 suppliers, and we standardize that in our platform to then offer a single point of integration between the SPS platform and your business. The next phase of that is basically looking at the connection between the SPS Commerce network and your system. So it could be NetSuite or SAP, Sage, QuickBooks, any number of different systems you might be leveraging that you want EDI to flow into automatically. So this would be sort of the full EDI, everything integrated approach. Otherwise, if you maybe are a little bit newer to EDI and don't want to necessarily have it tie into a system, we actually have a tool called our fulfillment tool as well. So SPS fulfillment is really similar to basically think of like an online email account where, retailer requires you to do EDI. You don't want to, set up a whole infrastructure yourself. You can subscribe to the SPS fulfillment tool. And what it does is when an order shows up, you get an email notification to say, hey, go ahead, log into SPS, check out what's going on, see what orders you have. You can do all of your EDI transactions through there. There's 3PL forwarding capabilities. So if you want to send those orders out to your different parties involved as well. And we can typically get it set up in a couple of days. So again, really great tool, pre-built, super easy to use. To give you a little bit of an idea of kind of the dashboards and everything, this is kind of that home page. So again, an order shows up, you'll see it listed here as a new order. It gives you a workflow to give you exactly what you need to do and prioritize for your day. This is also customizable depending on the role, whether you're maybe in the warehouse doing shipping or if you're in accounting or accounts payable, whatever it might be, you can customize those tiles across the top to show exactly what you need to do on a daily basis. So a little bit further here, basically, if you were to click on those new orders, you come into this menu and see, okay, great, I have, what is that, four new orders, I think, for Target to go ahead and process. And when you actually click into those, then the nice thing about SPS is, again, purchase orders from different retailers look different, right? They're going to send over different information. We standardize all that. So it's going to look the same within our platform here. And it actually provides you with a human readable transaction as well. So Target is sending you an EDI purchase order in that EDI language. SPS converts it behind the scenes and provides you with this, basically a printable PDF document as well. In addition to that, on the right-hand side, you can see the order, shipment, billing, and done sections. We actually prompt you specifically with what next steps you have. So again, some retailers require you to send shipment information. Some only require an invoice. This is actually built with the intelligence in the system so that it'll prompt you with specifically based on that retailer's requirements. It'll tell you what you need to send back. So super easy to use. I'd say anybody from a brand new employee up to a CEO that maybe has been running the business forever, everybody can log in there and know what to do. Now, the second tier to that, and kind of what I had touched on with that system integration side, is SPS can have that fulfillment tool running in the background and then also plug into different ERP or accounting systems. So the benefit there is instead of having someone logging into that platform to do their work within the SPS fulfillment tool, if you spend your day within NetSuite or everything is in QuickBooks, we can automate those two and link it up. So when an order comes in from a retailer in through EDI and SPS, we can actually have it flow directly into QuickBooks so you can view it in there, do your invoicing within QuickBooks, and then send it out and it'll go through SPS back to the retailer without needing a sort of an extra touch point or extra data entry there as well. So makes a lot of sense for companies that have a lot of EDI requirements, higher number of trading partners they're working with or higher volume of transactions, a great fit for those businesses. So in summary, I don't need to spend too much time here, but again, SPS Commerce, we are the industry leading full service solution out there. Things to think about in terms of doing EDI. Again, it's more than just a one-time IT project to set it up. Having that sort of people and expertise and the team with established best practices and existing relationships with the different buying organizations, it's a huge asset. Something to think about for a business, thinking about, hey, do I want to implement EDI? A little more background on SPS. We have over 1,700 employees here. I think we're around 1,200 in our Minneapolis office, and then that global reach as well. So there to be the long-term partner for you to help the business grow. And I think lastly, I really want to just leave everyone with, a couple of key reminders here. I think it's something important to think about this as we're heading into the busy holiday season. I'm sure everyone's, ramping up for that and trying to figure out how the next few months are going to go. But, if you're doing EDI today, ask yourself, hey, is EDI a core competency of my business? Is this something I want my resources tied to, or would I rather, partner with a company like SPS to basically be that EDI expert for my business, and I can reallocate my resources elsewhere? Second, if you're not doing EDI, but you're experiencing different challenges, it could be chargebacks, or it could be errors from doing things over the phone or via phone or fax, email, orders. EDI and just simply implementing a basic EDI interface with your trading partners could be a really great way to fix that. And then lastly, growth. I mean, companies come to us frequently when they say, hey, I've been doing this a certain way for a long time, but my business is growing. I need to automate this. How can I gain some efficiencies here? And lastly, EDI, I always say, it can be a major business benefit if it's done well. It can also be a challenge if it's not done well. So having an expert on your side that's able to help with that is going to make that much easier to basically automate the processes, get paid faster, and get yourself into a better place long term. So with that, I would actually wrap things up. Bill, I don't know if you had any sort of closing thoughts here before we sort of jump into questions or anything like that, but happy to open it up to you before we turn things over to Trung for the question section.
No, I think, Brian, you covered all of it very well. I would just say, like, to your point earlier, Brian, you said it in a couple different ways, is, we work with organizations where EDI it may be familiar, right? Whether that be a customer in the past, or you've been asked by a current customer, or EDI is a completely foreign term and you have no idea what it means until today. I'll just say that is not uncommon whatsoever. That's what we're here for, myself and Brian working with Trung and team, because EDI is coming up more and more, whether that meaning you're a buyer and we're looking at working with your supplier communities, or you're a seller working with large retailers. It ranges from all angles and in all perspectives. So that's what I would say. Again, there's a lot of information here. It is not daunting. It is just meant to make sure we're educating you all in the proper way, and how SPS fits within that and takes that on behalf of our customers. So with that, Trung, I'll turn it over to you for the. I don't know if we have any questions. I know there's a couple that were in the chat, but I don't know if we have any additional.
I think everyone in the audience is kind of wrapping their head about everything you spoke about today. So I'll give everyone a couple minutes to gather their thoughts, and please don't be shy to post any questions you have in the Q&A box. We have these experts here. Please use them. I'll share a little bit about my experience with EDI. For those of you who don't know, my family owns a local bakery called the Tour Bakehouse, and we also have a chain of restaurants called the Tour Cafe. And my first introduction to EDI was actually through SPS Commerce. We were fortunate enough as a business to be asked by Costco if we would sell them some of our gift cards to run during their holiday season. And actually we're doing it again this year. So I have some purchase orders sitting in my SPS Commerce fulfillment account right now I gotta go to and take a look at. But it was a very easy process for us to integrate the POs coming from Costco. We used the fulfillment apps. We didn't actually have to put it into our accounting system, but it was easy to download the PO, create an invoice, and upload it back to fulfillment. So Costco knows when it's coming. And for our bakery business, we're so used to getting orders via phone or fax, and we were used to that over all the years because the majority of our customers were like hotels and smaller mom and pop shops, and that's the way they were doing things. But over the years, especially as we kind of focused our attention more on like the grocery industry, we noticed that a lot of the third-party logistics or even the supermarkets like Foodland and Whole Foods, they preferred all their information electronically as opposed to paper invoices. So we've been looking very closely at how do we run our entire business via EDI as opposed to just paper and fax and whatnot. So we're very excited about this new technology. Even though EDI has been around for quite some time, for Hawaii, it's still relatively new. So while we get to some questions, let's see what we have here. I have one. How can smaller producers meet the cost and capability expectations that retailers have? I feel it's a nice, easy softball question for you folks because a lot of retailers here, or manufacturers, sorry, they look at these big retailers like the Costco and the Whole Foods of the world. They want to have their product there. And they realize when they ask, it's like, oh, can you do all these things for us? And they may not realize the cost that's involved when trying to do that all on your own. So I think you touched on it, but did you want to elaborate on how SPS can help?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I would honestly say it ties back to kind of what you were just talking about, where there's different processes for different, relationships you have in place, different buyers. EDI can be something where, if you have just one big, account or one big retailer asking for a requirement like that, you can certainly implement it with them and leave the rest as is. A lot of companies that we work with as well, maybe they have one large buying organization they work with that's like, 80% of the volume of their orders, but then they have 5 other customers that are, order a couple times a month. They may look at SPS and say, geez, I need to do EDI with all these, but I'm not going to get the value, or it's not worth the investment for me to integrate everything with my system. They can do what we would call like a hybrid approach, where they would just have their single largest customer, integrated with QuickBooks, for example, and the rest leave on that web-based tool that Trung, you mentioned you're familiar with. So that's a really common way to do it. From a cost perspective, I totally get it. A lot of businesses say, geez, this is just an extra cost for, doing business. But it kind of depends on the volume of how frequently they're getting orders. But a lot of businesses I work with, they'll look at this and say, it's an extra cost or an extra tool I have to pay for. But they'll look back at it a year later and say, geez, it more than, made up its cost in the savings I have from reallocating my team doing other things, or eliminating, Amazon's probably the worst, chargebacks, like thousands and thousands of dollars in problems there. I don't know how strict, buyers are more locally for you, but that's something I definitely hear as well, as instead of viewing it purely as an added cost, it's looking at it sort of the soft cost versus the hard cost of adding a tool. Bill, do you have any thoughts there? That's kind of where I generally would hear it fits in.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. There's certainly a cost to it, but then it just comes back to the ROI of the solution, not only for you, but depending on if you're a buyer or seller, the other party as well, right? So let's just say if you're a grocer working with, let's just put a number to it, 50 suppliers, and doing it through whether that be email, I shouldn't even say fax, but email, phone, what have you, there's a cost to you and there's a cost to them in terms of resources and potential like data integration risks. So those are exercises that we walk through with our customers or potential customers of, hey, this is a completely new concept. There's a cost associated with it, but what's the ROI at the end of the day? And Brian, I think to your point, it's not an all or nothing approach. Whether that be, hey, we have a certain subset of strategic vendors or customers this makes sense for, or no, we have 100 vendors that this makes sense for, and how does that pricing scale? In both scenarios, just specifically around our SPS's model, is the more that you do, the less that you pay per, just kind of at a very high level. So I think depending on, what the particular situation is, for us at the end of the day, we just want to walk through, hey, what does that community look like? What pain are you experiencing? How much time is allocated? And if SPS can come in and help provide some additional value, and what that looks like to the actual cost of the solution overall.
We had a question posed to the panelists earlier. How many businesses use SPS Commerce services in the state of Hawaii? And Bill, I think you tried to reply, but I think mention it again so that everyone can see the answer now.
I tried pulling it live, and then it wasn't working well for me. So I'll say, let's just use that as a takeaway. I know with over 40,000 customers globally, I know that number is in the hundreds, just based upon our reach within the retail community. But we can probably a better estimate, if you will, once we kind of can pull some of that data in the next couple of days.
Okay, and I want to mention that they may not be using SPS specifically, but a lot of businesses here do accept EDI. That may not be their only way. So there are probably vendors or retailers you're interacting with that you're currently doing paper invoices that would really appreciate if you switch to EDI. I know that's the case for a lot of the folks we work with. And if you're in the food business like me, a lot of larger manufacturers have moved in the last few years and bought a lot of the small local distributors, and they're wanting to switch to EDI. So we have like the US Foods and the Cisco's of the world moving into Hawaii as well. So I think this is the direction the market is definitely moving towards.
Well, yeah, and I'll add, I think that's a good point, Trung. I think from a retailer's perspective, so if you're selling into what retail, whether that means like a grocer or someone like a Walmart or what have you, like there may be other mechanisms that you're doing today, but what impact does that have? The answer could be none, I mean, candidly, or it could be, hey, one, we're being fined, or we're having to raise or Walmart is having to raise our price because we're doing it manually, as an example. Or two, from a pure vendor scorecarding perspective, we've actually seen retailers saying, oh, these guys can do EDI, we're going to bump them up the list in terms of their scorecarding. So those are just examples outside, like, hey, like, can you do it? Versus, hey, what's the impact if we do it? Outside of just managing this technology.
That perfectly leads into the next question. Another attendee has asked, I wonder how this could help a small food cooperative in Honolulu. Grocery is already a retail operation that operates on a very thin margin. So I guess the question is, how does this work if you're a little bit smaller as a retailer?
Brian, you want to take that, or it's up to you?
I mean, I was going to say, I would say it comes down to looking at that in that instance, the supplier community and what the current process is with that supplier community, right? If it's a relatively low number of suppliers and there's not a huge pain point, that ROI might not be there. But if there are issues where, looking for ways to streamline or certain steps along the way, and maybe even looking at like a trimmed down, not a full scope of, I think I walked through, purchase order acknowledgement, advance ship notice, invoice. We don't always see buying organizations or grocers adopting all that. It's really common just to do an order and an invoice. And they say, you know what, I don't need all that extra information. And that then has sort of a trimmed down solution of saying, hey, we're going to get 90% of the value from simply automating orders and invoices. So that's, again, kind of that hybrid approach. It's a very, have a conversation, understand what the challenges are, and then work back from there. I mean, I don't know if I hit on it before, but EDI, there's probably 100 or 200 different transaction types that businesses use. Some use significantly more than others, and some it's just a purchase order and an invoice. So I don't know if that helps to answer it, or Bill, if you had anything you'd add.
No, I think you hit it on it. We answered in some of the previous questions as well in terms of scalability and what that looks like and the value. But I think the additional context you added, Brian, is important as well.
Okay, I have some questions that I came up with because, we're looking so thoroughly at EDI. Is how secure is the information I put on the network? I know it goes from me to your servers to the vendor/retailer, but is it stored for a long time? Is it backed up at all up there?
Yeah, I mean, Bill, honestly, I should know the specific security certifications we have. We have industry leading basically everything. SPS, we have multiple data centers globally. So if something happens, in one region, we are spread out and able to support that. Bill, anything to add there?
I know, I put it this way, I know it's a huge focus of SPS around, like with our internal technology teams, we don't outsource it to be compliant with the same security that our customers have to be compliant. At the end of the foundational way, we're a public company, right? So if we're not securing our customers' data, that's a pretty significant issue. So we have a whole lot of resources that spend a whole lot of time on these types of certifications. I mean, we can probably get that list following this call as well, but long story short, we're a public company supporting over 40,000 customers globally, that they are required to do that. So in order for us to support them in the way that they need supported, we have to be able to be compliant and certified in the same way they are.
Got it. And I know looking at the list of attendees that were going to come, there were a lot of surprisingly like government folks. Does SPS work with any kind of government organizations at all?
Yeah, we do. I mean, trying to think of, EDI, we really built our business and focused the talk today on retail and sort of grocery. But you think about food service, for example, is another big area with I've seen requests with school districts and, prison systems and all sorts of different stuff. And EDI, it does have a place in there. It's not as common from sort of a military side as well. I know, it's like what Army Air Force Exchange, Marine Corps Exchange, NEXCOM Navy. These are all large partners of SPS, so we handle all that for them. I guess I don't know the specifics in the background of the government involvement there, but that's a big area as well. Specifically with food, I would say too. Bill, any thoughts, or do you have any other experience there?
No, I was going to call NEXCOM, Navy, Air Force, Navy Exchange. Those are, to your point, Brian, huge partners of SPS. And then there are always ones that are, not as common, right? In terms of who those government agencies are and how they want to trade. I mean, just like retailers, everybody is a bit different. But I would say most commonly is the ones we already listed off. And I would say some of the outletters that we have experience with just may not be at that same volume is other government agencies like Brian mentioned before.
Hawaii has a very large military presence, so like the NEX exchanges, they're a big customer of ours, especially in the grocery business. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
And I mean, that's one thing I would mention too, like SPS Commerce. I mean, I joined back in 2013, and I look at the growth we've had since then, and that growth has largely come from our customers or the suppliers coming to us and saying, hey, here's a retailer I'd love to do EDI with, or here's a retailer coming to us and say, hey, here's a list of suppliers I'd love to do EDI with. We're constantly building out that network. So if there are requests and there's mutual interest from both parties to do EDI, and if we haven't done it, for example, a supplier coming to us and say, hey, here's a new retailer I'd love to work with. I look it up. Oh, we haven't connected with them. SPS Commerce actually proactively builds that connection out to that retailer without any additional cost above our normal cost of adding just a Walmart or a Costco to your SPS account. We build it out basically on the house saying, hey, this is viewed as basically R&D. Like if you want this connection, probably going to have another supplier come and say they want it as well. So that's how we've grown it out to 3,000 or 3,500 different buying orders in the system. So always adding to the list. I know we have a list of trading partners on our website, but I think the marketing team is maybe a little behind on keeping up with the development and everything. So I wouldn't trust that list to be exclusive, but can certainly check that as well to see who's on there.
That's interesting. So that kind of ties into the co-op question, where if it's a co-op of different folks trying to bring in produce and products from different areas of Hawaii, maybe having them all in the same type of system or being able to find other folks to join and follow the same system would be one of the benefits of using EDI. And you folks can go out there and help find retailers or suppliers to convince them to use EDI?
So from maybe I think I'm understanding. You're saying like if a co-op or a buying organization wanted to basically reach out to their supplier community to engage them on doing EDI.
Correct.
Is that what you're...
Correct.
Got it. Yeah. No, that's half the battle, right? Figuring out EDI and deciding if it's going to be a fit, and doing that initial IT setup or project. That's sort of the tip of the iceberg. The other side of it is the adoption, right? So reaching out to the supplier community and, with the proper messaging, and saying, hey, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. There's maybe you have EDI experience as a supplier, maybe you don't. But these are a couple different ways SPS can help you meet that need, whether it's using an SPS service or if you have your own existing service, going through a one-time certification to then be able to do it. But a lot of the retailers that come to us, they just say, hey, I need to set up EDI, and they think, it's a one and done. But that vendor adoption and getting that project to a success point with everyone adopting it is the real key. And within SPS, Bill, I don't know, is that the team we have dedicated simply to doing vendor outreach or onboarding on behalf of retailers? It's like 50 or 60 people now, I think, that that is their job, is to reach out with the messaging on behalf of buying organizations that have partnered with us to do that. Because think about a retailer with maybe 100 suppliers, they probably don't have the bandwidth internally to have someone on the phone calling all those people to say, this is what we're doing, that's why we're doing it, here's the mutual benefits for everybody involved, and having that message come across, in a welcoming fashion, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. Seems like there are no other questions. Perfect, because we have a few minutes left. Did you folks want to share contact info, or how would you want to close this? Nicole, any thoughts?
Yeah, I can definitely share Brian and Bill's contact info in the post email that will go out. That includes the recording as well.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, I would say from an SPS closing perspective, just if anybody has any questions about anything we walked through or wants to have a more of an in-depth conversation, just make me that primary point of contact. Reach out via email or call me, whatever, and I can get it funneled into the right team here at SPS. Again, have a lot of people here willing to have a conversation and help, but just sort of funneling it into me as that initial point is going to be the best experience for everybody involved, and make sure we get you the help right away. So happy to help. And again, Trung and Nicole, really appreciate you having us on. We're happy to jump on here today.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian, Bill, and Trung, for teaching us so much about EDI. This is a great learning experience for, I'm sure, a lot of Hawaii companies. So thank you very much. And thanks everyone for joining us today. I'll send on the recording when it's ready. All right.
Mahalo. Thank you.
Bye.